I'm Dr. Amaleya Goneos-Malka. Welcome to Womanity-Women in Unity, the show that celebrates women's milestone achievements in their struggle for liberation, self-emancipation, human rights, democracy, and much more. Joining us today for our series on women in the judiciary is Judge Colleen Collis from the Gauteng Division of the High Court. Welcome to the show, Judge Collis.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to share my experience with yourselves and the rest of the audience that will eventually listen to the program.
We appreciate you being on the show and being part of the series, which has been going for several years now. But Judge Collis, you weren't always in the judiciary. Can you tell us where it all began, pursuing a legal profession and then eventually sitting on the bench?
Yes, thank you. Well, my parents are Craven and Carrie Collis. I'm the eldest of three siblings at home. My father is an educator. He believes in lifelong learning and has always instilled that in me as a child. So my passion started with where I was born. I was born in a town called Regenpark, which is situated in Boksburg, and that's really a mining town. My parents and their parents, my grandparents, were forced to move there through the Group Areas Act, which through the previous regime had dictated where certain people of a certain race should stay. And that's how I ended up being in Boksburg town. So from a personal perspective, I think what happened in that town, growing up in that area, segregated, separate from other race groups, started forming my inclination to understand the laws of the country and also to make a change, to bring about a change, because I felt as a child already that was not right, to live in a segregated and not an integrated society.
Judge Collis, reflecting on that moment, and it really is a painful period in this country, often when we've had conversations with some of your colleagues in the judicial system, it has always stemmed from their pursuit of law has always stemmed from some type of injustice in childhood. How is it, I wonder, as it's almost like the eyes of a child see through things and see the possibility of driving change, whereas adults, of course, they don't agree with it, they accept it.
Yes, I think, perhaps in my teenage years, I was, through my parents and their involvement, my parents were very politicized. So as a child, I grew up in a household where my parents would talk about the injustices taking place in society at large. But as a teenager, in Boksburg town, we had a lake called the Boksburg Lake. But that lake was only there for recreational purposes for white people. So although it was situated in the town itself, and black people were entering the town to go and work and purchase goods, we were not allowed to use the recreational facilities in the town itself. And that pained us a lot as a community, especially in Boksburg. So we ended up having what was called the Save Boksburg campaign. I think it was late 80s. And what happened during that campaign is we decided as a community that we're going to retract our buying power, our economic power in that society. We were not going to buy in Boksburg town any longer until such time as people of all color and race can have access to the recreational facilities and specifically the Boksburg Lake. So we participated in that campaign and it literally crippled the town because the minute black people decided not to purchase anymore in Boksburg town, many of the businesses ended up closing up because of that. So to come back to your question as a child, yes, that's true, because I felt it was important to participate in that campaign. We had T-shirts, we were walking up and down, we had demonstrations, but I felt that would bring about change, and it eventually did, because the eyes of the government went open, and eventually we were able to access not just our buying power in that town, but we were able to access the recreational facilities such as the lake.
That's such a good success story.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So having those lived experiences actually seeing when you retract buying power and the power that people have through that, and then getting the results of access to shops, to recreational facilities. Were those all components that led you to go into law because you were seeing how change could actually materialize?
Yes, I think that was really the trigger for me because although I really wanted to study law from primary school level already, but it
Wow.
was really at high school level that desire got festered because I've always been a born leader. At primary school level, my teachers would allow me to stand in the front of the class. I would record who's making the noise. I would collect the assignments. I would report to the teacher who's been misbehaving. So I was always a leader. I think I'm a born leader, really. But that resulted in me deciding that I can actually do something realistically about this, making sure people's rights are protected and enforced where they're being trampled on. And that's why I ended up to go and study law.
And now that you're in this vacation, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is about the differences between the High Court division and lower courts in terms of the types of cases you see, and what are some of those distinctions?
All right, now first the lower courts, and that's actually where I also, my first appointment as a judicial officer was in the lower court because I was appointed a magistrate at some point. I served there for 15 years of my career.
Wow.
Yes, so the lower courts is considered to be a court of first instance. For many people in society, that's the only court that they're ever going to have access to and an engagement with. Because in the lower courts, you have what is called the maintenance court. There's a seat there. The equality court has a seat there. The traffic court has a seat there. You have the domestic violence court that finds itself within the lower court of the judiciary. So those are the types of cases that ordinary South Africans would access the court for. And when a person gets arrested, that's the court of first instance. So that's the court that decides if the issue of bail comes up, whether you should be allowed bail or not. It's not something that happens in the High Court as a court of first instance. It always happens in the Magistrates Court. But the High Court, the difference with High Court cases and lower court cases, Magistrates Court cases, is, for instance, in the High Court is the only court in the country, or is a court in a country, that can declare any form of legislation unconstitutional or invalid. So no magistrate's court can do that. A High Court can also declare a person deceased. So if a person, in terms of the legislation, has been away for 10 years, cannot be found, then in a High Court you can launch proceedings to declare that person deceased. Sometimes it's for policies that has to be accessed, or for people that were married to a person that has to move on in life, for instance. If you're charged with treason, for instance, those cases will be adjudicated in the High Court. No magistrate's court can do that. All appeals from the magistrate's court or reviews from a magistrate's court, that's done by a High Court exclusively. So that's in broad terms the distinction between what type of cases we are dealing with in the High Court as opposed to the magistrate's court. Yes.
And given all of your experiences, and you must have been exposed to so many different types of cases, can you share a couple of memorable ones that you've presided over?
Well, I think my first one was actually when I was a judicial officer in the lower courts, and that was the case of Sonke Gender Justice Network versus Julius Malema. So that was a case in the Equality Court where the complainant, which is Sonke, brought a case of hate speech against Julius Malema, and that was as a result of the comment he had made with reference to the rape victim in former President Jacob Zuma's rape trial. He had made the unsavory comment to say a victim having been raped must have had a nice time if she stays over the night after she had been raped and she has breakfast the next morning and she asks for taxi money to go back to her home. And Sonke, obviously, like most women, was very affronted by that comment, and they brought the case against the respondent, Mr. Malema, for the utterances, the insightful hurt that his utterances had caused. So they'd opened a case in the Equality Court. And I found against him. And I ordered him to make a public apology to all women, and specifically that rape victim, and also to pay 50,000 rand to Power, which is the People Opposed to Women Abuse. It's an organization in South Africa also. And my second case, I would say, that I stands out for me is the trustee for the time being Grand Trust case versus the Minister of Environmental Affairs. So here, the applicants brought a case against the minister for her being in violation of Section 24 of our Constitution. Now, Section 24A specifically provides that everyone in the country has a right to a safe environment which is not harmful to their health and well-being. And in this instance, the applicants brought this case because the area that they were complaining about, it was promulgated to be an area where the levels of air pollution was very high. It was called the Highveld Priority Area. And in order to address the high air pollutions in the area, the minister had to promulgate regulations to measure that and to ensure that the mining companies who find themselves in that area are brought to book for having caused so much air pollution. And as a result of that, the case was initiated in the High Court, and I had found against the minister for being in violation of Section 24 of the Constitution. It's also referred to as the deadly air case, if you were to look it up or Google it. And then the third case, I would say, is the case of Jacobs versus the Road Accident Fund. So here, the plaintiff, Ms. Jacobs, was in a relationship with the deceased who had died in a motor vehicle collision. And she had been in a relationship, a cohabitation relationship with the deceased for the last 6 years prior to his untimely death. And when he had died, she had brought a case, instituted proceedings against the Road Accident Fund for loss of support. Because prior to his untimely death, they had made arrangements to get married, and he had introduced her to her family, and he was in fact responsible for supporting her. So as a result of his death, she had instituted proceedings against the Road Accident Fund for loss of support. But they rejected it initially because they said you do not, in law, qualify as a person in respect of whom the deceased had a duty to support. But the way I had approached the case was to say many people are cohabiting today. They're not married to one another, but they do have a reciprocal duty to support each other. And as a result of that, in terms of our common law and the duty that we have to develop the common law as the courts, as high courts, I had found that although she was only cohabiting with the deceased, they had a reciprocal duty for loss of support to each other, and she should not be discriminated against by not having a claim against the Road Accident Fund. So I thought that was a different approach adopted to Road Accident Fund cases. Because in terms of the Act itself, it was only children of a deceased or their spouses that would have a loss of support claim. But many people are not necessarily your spouse today, but you support them. And for that reason, I found in her favor.
You deal with such incredible diversity, from things on an individual level to things in the public domain, and looking at the better interests. For example, when you were talking about climate and environment. Judge Collis, apart from your day job, you have a number of different interests which are really instrumental, I would say, in the community of the judiciary. For example, you serve as treasurer of the South African chapter of the International Association of Women's Judges. Some of its core values include recognizing the fundamental importance of gender equality, using human rights laws as a vehicle to integrate women in society, ensuring access to equal justice for everyone, exercising judicial leadership boldly, independently, and creatively. And I think that we've heard echoes of the boldly, independently, and creatively in some of your judgments. Tell us a little bit more about your involvement with this association.
Yes. Well, I took up membership of SAC-IAWJ. This is now the South African branch, so to speak, of the International Association of Women Judges. That's in 2017. It's before I actually became a judge. And then the following year, in 2018, that's shortly before I became appointed as a judge, I actually was elected, or rather, I was appointed a judge in the beginning of 2018, and later in that year, I was elected as a provincial coordinator. There's almost like a provincial leader for the association in Gauteng, together with Judge Wendell and Magistrate Jordan. So we were elected the provincial leaders for Gauteng, and our core responsibility at the time was to ensure that the programs that is set up for SEC-IAWJ is actually rolled out in the particular province. So we have one of our flagship programs is the mentoring program, for instance. So we were involved in that. We also have a program where a number of programs where we do outreach. So, for instance, we do outreach in prisons. We do prison visits, specifically where females are incarcerated, and we do outreach programs where we visit civil society, such as old age homes, for instance. So we partner with an old age home, for instance, or a children's home, and then we do from time to time outreach programs. We collect gifts for children's homes, for instance, or toiletries for old age homes, and then we organize an event where we actually go and visit the home, and then we deliver these toiletries, for instance, for old age people. So that was my function, my core function when I was a provincial coordinator. And then in 2023, I was elected the treasurer of the organization, but you only serve a period of 2 years, and I'm no longer at present the current treasurer of the association. But they, in that function, because you're part of the executive when you serve as a treasurer, your core function is really to ensure that funding is secured for the organization, and members make contributions every month to the organization in the form of a subscription that they pay. So you have to make sure that members pay their subscriptions, and when they fall behind, you have to call upon them to pay up their arrears. So yes, I'm still a member of SEC-IAWJ, but I'm no longer serving as the treasurer, yes.
One of the things that you mentioned was a flagship program of mentorship. And some of the challenges that we've encountered through different discourses with people in different environments or disciplines has been the issue of networking, and in particular how professional networking really factors strongly in career development. But it does seem to be an area of weakness for women. So based on some of your experiences, how do you think women can be more effective at building and nurturing professional networks?
Yes. Look, I think the first step that you should take as a woman is actually to belong to an association or a formation. So in my career up until now, I've belonged to a number of associations. When I was a magistrate, I belonged to JOASA, which is the Judicial Officers Association of South Africa. When I was an attorney, I took up membership with the BLA, the Black Lawyers Association. There's also SALA, which is the South African Women Lawyers Association, and then there's NADAL, for instance. When I became a judge, I took up membership of SEC-IAWJ. So the first step, I think, is to belong to an association. Once you've taken the decision to belong, your membership must not just be by paying subscriptions. You should actually get involved in the programs of the association. So there's a number of members, they just belong by paying subscription. You don't even see them attending conferences. They don't even attend programs of the association. So it's membership and becoming involved in the initiatives of the initiatives or projects of the associations, yes. But then I would also say you have a responsibility once you become a judge, I think, to also participate in programs, in training programs for other women specifically. Because, for instance, I was never a member of the bar. I was never an advocate. But since becoming a judge, I've been actively involved in pupil training, in trial advocacy training for pupils, which I think is important. I've also participated, and it's an ongoing project, to train aspirant female judges that attend the program. It's a program that's that's run under the auspices of SAJE. And I've also, this past week, I just completed a moot court training that is for university students participating in moot courts, in a moot court program, for instance. So I go there and I assist them by adjudicating cases that they present during a moot court competition. So you're right, networking is very important, but it takes on various forms. And when you participate in initiatives and programs, you get to see other professionals, you get to engage with other professionals, and other professionals get to inspire you, and vice versa.
There's the exposure, there's the collaboration. There is also one of the things when you were reflecting on in your current role is the role modeling dynamic, because
Yes,
people can see you, they've got access to you. And I think that's very different than seeing someone on a TV screen or reading a script of a black and white document. But here, you really are in their presence.
yes, that's true. They have an opportunity to see you not in your role just as a judge in a courtroom, physical courtroom, but they get to understand what does it actually take to fulfill that role outside of the actual courtroom environment. And they can interact with you almost on a social level because they get to understand that judges are also human beings. They're normal people. They have the same frustrations that everybody else is having about what's happening around them in civil society. And they do appreciate the humanity of the position that you hold.
Talking about judges being real people, the struggle, or rather the juggle between career and motherhood has always been a challenge for women. How do you see this?
I think, well, okay, firstly, I'm not a mother in the true sense. I'm not a mother in the sense that I struggle, I have children that I look after, but I do have children in my broader family that I have to mother and that I have to assist in rearing. So I think sometimes people think that you only have a challenge if you have your own children. But there are also challenges that one is presented with through being a role figure or motherly figure for other children. So it is quite challenging if you have to navigate a career and expanding your career or enhancing in your own career as opposed to motherhood and the challenges that might face. Yes.
Judge Collis, you're very involved across different spheres in the law. And one thing that I wanted to ask you is really about looking at the influx of more women in the judiciary and sort of penetrating almost every sphere of law. Do you consider that by having more women in the whole justice value chain perhaps leads to decisions and public policies that are maybe more considerate of issues that affect women, whether that is equality, employment, or even discrimination?
Yes, I think it does play a part or a positive role if more women are actually represented in the judiciary. But I would answer it in this fashion. Once appointed female judges should actually avail themselves to assist with career shadowing opportunities, especially for practitioners that are not part of the judiciary as yet, such as programs hosted by SAJE for aspirant female judges. So those are members in practice, advocates and attorneys, or magistrates even, that want to join the judiciary, but they're going through that program first before they can be called to come and act and then eventually apply to become permanent judges. But permanent female judges should participate in those programs because I believe that women, if they see their own participating in those programs, they will become encouraged to see it follow through. And they will also feel that they are in a safe space to highlight their own challenges in making it in the judiciary once appointed. So more often than not, some women, when they do get appointed, that's where they stop because they think, I've reached the ultimate goal. And they forget about the others that are yet to follow through, that have the same ambitions that they've once had to become part of members of the judiciary. So it's true, if there are more women, there's greater representativity, but that's not where it ends because there's so many others that harbor the same ambitions to get into the judiciary.
It's a responsibility, I think, on
Yeah,
developing your discipline, developing the talent pipeline that comes through the system.
yeah, that's true. It is. It certainly is. So we all have to carry that responsibility. It is a shared responsibility. It's not just for the women leaders within the judiciary. It's for every single one of us that's forming part of it. We have that responsibility that we carry.
Talking about responsibilities to women, obviously in August it is a special period for South Africa where not only do we celebrate National Women's Day, but also pretty much Women's Month. And this year's theme I found was interesting, being building resilient economies for all, women leading the future of trade. In your view, what are some of the perspectives of how this type of theme could play out in practice for women?
Well, we had the historic march in 1956, which was really a turning point in South Africa in respect of the role of women in our struggle for freedom in society at large. I think today women from all walks of life now compete on equal footing with our male counterparts in this country. We should have greater emphasis on how we give women access to the ability to compete on equal footing. So, for instance, from a practical point of view, I thought in our societies, women are the caregivers, primary caregivers. They are the people that provide food on the table. If a child is hungry, he doesn't go to the father, he goes to the mother to say, Mommy, I need some food. Where's the food? So, in the societies that we come from, women have formations such as stokvels. They have organizations or groupings in their church, for instance. They are responsible for fundraising at school more often than not. So we need to ensure that the government of the day actually give those women or greater access to participate in our economy more fully, especially the ones that are in power. We should encourage the government to make sure that they put policies in place to capacitate those women. And where women are utilized by big businesses, for instance, they are already involved in big businesses. Women should be careful not just to be used as a front. For instance, to get government tenders, for instance, or work. They must insist that they participate in not just the decision making, but also in sharing in the wealth. Because once they start sharing in the wealth, that will translate into sharing distribution of that wealth amongst their children. That's how I think this team should actually help us in South Africa.
I like
Yes.
the thinking.
So something difficult.
This period I also find is a time when I do quite a lot of reflection on the gains that we've made and also where we still need to go. So in your view, what have been some of the important equality gains that women have attained?
Yes, well, in the world we have the celebration of International Women's Day, although it's a different date. It's on the 8th of March. In South Africa, we celebrate it on the 9th of August. But the day is really there because we acknowledge women's social and economic, cultural and political contributions that they've made in this country. But today, every girl child in South Africa has access to a school. It was not like that before. Today, we have parity pay in South Africa. So women get paid the same. As a female judge, I get paid the same as a male judge. There are perhaps some industries where it's difficult to monitor, but on the whole, women get paid the same as their male counterparts in industries. We have in South Africa also a number of laws protecting women in South Africa, such as the Domestic Violence Act. We have the Employment Equity Act in South Africa. We have today in the judiciary, we have a sexual harassment policy, which is a great achievement. We've never had this in our judiciary, and we have it today. Also, we have our first female Chief Justice, Justice Maya. We have also the President of the ECA, that's a female. We have a number of judge presidents as females of our high courts. The Land Court is also headed by a female. We have women serving on the Electoral Court, women serving on the Competition Court, and we've got a number of judges, female judges. So we've made a number of strides in South Africa. But in the division where I serve, we've not had a female in leadership. This is the Gauteng Division, ever. And I think the time has now come for that change. We can't be the biggest division in the country, and other courts cannot take members of the judiciary in Gauteng to the SCA, to the Constitutional Court, to other courts such as the Labour Appeal Court, but then we don't have women in leadership in Gauteng. So I think that's where we lag behind within the judiciary, I think.
Hasn't an opportunity opened now?
Yeah, one has. So I'm saying there's a vacancy now, and now's the time to ensure that it gets filled by a competent woman, of course. I'm looking forward to that.
What's the process?
Well, the process is, firstly, women should be given an opportunity to act at the very least, because it's difficult to apply if you have never been given an opportunity to act in that role. And then they should apply. Because by virtue of the fact that you are competent to be a sitting judge, you are competent to be a leader of a division. There's no different criteria that's going to be applied. Of course, they will look at other skills, whether you possess such other skills, such as leadership skills, administrative skills. But you're already a judge, you're already considered to be fit and proper. You can't be a judge, being fit and proper to be a judge, but you're not fit and proper to be a leader of a division. Yes.
And I think there's that essential word that you said there, apply, because if you don't apply, you can't access the opportunity.
Yeah, that's true. You should apply. That's true.
Judge Collis, we're coming towards the end of the show, and one of the things that I ask all my guests is about some of the factors that they feel have contributed towards their success. And everybody has a different set of ingredients for this recipe. So please share with us, what have been some of your drivers of success?
I think the first would be to say that you must be, as a woman, you must be resolute in your decision making. I think if you sit on the fence, it becomes difficult for you to decide what is it that you wish to do, or which direction you wish to take in your career. The second one, I think, is that you must be forthright in your opinions. Some women are too scared to speak up, so they rather keep quiet. But if you're not forthright, if you don't say, I'm not happy with this, with ABC, then nobody will know that you have an issue. So be forthright. I think that you should remain grounded in your religion, because it's your center. And if you don't have that, you don't really know where you come from, and you don't know where you're going to as a person. And then lastly, I would say, I think you should finish what you start. It's so easy for women to give up, because you are going to hit a roadblock. You're going to hit it. But you must be able to say, I'm going to continue. I'm going to stand up and continue. So I would say those are the values that drove my success, yeah.
And as we're celebrating Women's Month, who've been some of the important women in your life?
Well, I would say, firstly, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, my mother's mother. She's deceased now, but for the first 6 years of my life, she was raising me. In the same town where I stayed with my parents, but she looked after me the first 6 years of my life. I went and stayed with my parents only from age 7, more or less. She was a very forthright person. I think I learned that from her, a very loving person. And then my own mother. But my mom specifically taught me to be generous with my time and also my resources. So I get into trouble with my time because I always say yes to it. People ask me to do something. The answer is never no. I said, I can squeeze this thing in also. And I end up, maybe running out of time just for other things. And then also my sister, I have one sister. She's my younger sister, but she sometimes, most of the times, acts like my older sister. But she is a mother herself, so she mothers me a lot. And she's also taught me of the valuable lessons that is locked up in the Bible, because she's very religious. And then I think the women in my church, my local church. So I'm Anglican, raised Anglican, the Anglican faith. So we have women, we've got what is called the Anglican Women's Fellowship in church. So I'm a member of that fellowship. And so those women are also there to sustain one on different levels of one's life. So those are I would say those are women in my life. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing them with us. And lastly, as we close out today's program, please, in recognition of Women's Month, share a few words of inspiration that you'd like to pass on to girls and women that are listening to us.
Yes. Firstly, I would say that you must make your voice heard. Because when you speak as a woman, somebody out there is listening. A girl child is listening. Another female is listening. A grandmother might be listening. So you need to speak up as women. It's not good enough to keep quiet and hope somebody else will do the speaking or the talking on your behalf. And as you speak, people hopefully will draw courage from your words. So it's important to raise your voice. Then I think for the girl children out there, my words would be that they must be encouraged to have close relationships with their grandmothers, with their mothers, with their sisters, and with their aunts. And as women, grandmothers, mothers, aunts, sisters, we should actually frown upon children being abused. All children, boys and girls. Them being abused through sexual deviancy, or them being abused through the usage of alcohol, or them abusing alcohol, or them abusing drugs, we should actually frown upon that, because too often women are keeping quiet about it. And we only get to hear of them once the problem is already in existence. But they don't really take sufficient steps, preventative steps, to arrest the problem, I would say. And then thirdly, I think as women, we should actually raise concern against mothers that keep quiet when abuse are happening in their households. Because it's all of a sudden it's reared its head in our society. We see every second case we see being reported on. It's about a woman having kept quiet or having participated in an abuse of a child, and sometimes even a girl child. So I would say those are my words of inspiration. In essence, speak up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and especially the advice that you gave at the end and throughout our discourse of speak up. It was wonderful to host you. Happy Women's Month.
Thank you so much. All the best.
You have been listening to Womanity, Women in Unity, and we have been talking to Judge Colleen Collis from the Gauteng Division of the High Court.